Alrighty, so these are the engines here that I was working on for what it's worth. They're two L24s, these two, and this is an L28. That's an N42 block with an N42 head. It doesn't turn over, but it wouldn't take much to get it to do that. That's the one I want to really kind of work on. And so this is what the one was that actually cost money. It had an EFI on it. I still have that over there, along with the exhaust. Okay, so that means electronic fuel injection. It turns over. It only cost $200 to get that. All the other engines were free, along with everything else that accompanied them. The other one that I also have is a Honda Accord engine. That's a 2.3 liter or something like that, the guy said. Looked it up. It's basically kind of like that. And it was for free because it'd been just sitting out there for like a couple of months or something. So I bought some tools here. Those are split beam tectonic, or not tectonic, tecton. That's a 3/4, or I'm not 3/4, 3/8, and that's a 1/2 inch. This is a 1/2 inch breaker bar. Got a Fowler dial bore and micrometer. I got a Lyle engine honer. I also happen to have a Fowler dial bore gauge. It's missing only one part, which is why it was cheap. All these were on eBay, right? And every one of them was with a good discount because they're used. Being fair, but the plan was to remove the engine head, but like that didn't work because it's just rusted on there. And of course, I bought the penetrant oil, and the breaker bar almost broke. They're hex heads, which is just the worst. So I actually got that. Clearly, that's on there. And let's see here. Well, I got stuck, but I wanted a thing to work on. That's kind of what that is, right? So like I am SMI, right? I'm trying to get on SSI. I can't really work a job, right? So my parents paid for all this. That's how that worked. It was a lot of arguing and a lot of, that to basically get something to work on for coping, shit. I got let's see here. You want to see it? It's a pretty simple ECU. It's a Speedrino ECU Project Titan 2.0. It can go up to 8 cylinders. It's got VVT. It's got the simple, throttle position, startup, all that stuff. And yeah. Well, that is a torque converter. If you want to look over here real quick, I have 1 and 2 transmissions that came with the engines. They're like, I think, $100 or something like that. That will fit the L blocks that I've got. One of them's manual, automatic, and it wouldn't take much to probably turn it, the other one, into an automatic as well. But one of them's 5-speed, one of them is 4-speed. Right, so the plan to take the head off, turn it into a cross flow. Not this head, I was just going to sell that. I was going to get a 3D printed, after some CAD work, head, and then nickel form it. There's like little holes here up to like 3 millimeters, which nickel can form into those holes and go through the block and actually become a fully structural part of the whole engine block, right? Which is not what that is. Okay, it's a head, but like some people don't know that, and that's a learning thing. But hey, I want to give you a story where back when I was real young, there was an alternator in some guy's car. Right, now this isn't what that is. That's not an alternator. None of these are alternators. So, that kind of thing. But they had these little blades on it, and it would spin. Right, and I thought that was a turbocharger. I started off at one point thinking that was a thing. And of course, you know, it's just a nice little relatable thing for those that are out there. It's a funny little thing. You might think that's the engine block, but no, that's the engine block there. What's below this is the engine block. Okay, folks? And this, well, front engine, you know, cover, chain cover, right? Well, I was going to replace that and ultimately get a CVT gear that goes off to 2 of these camshafts. There's one underneath this valve cover here, and of course one up there. That one sprays oil. This one needs oil. Depending on how I 3D print that and CAD it, then nickel form it, and I can actually, yes, torque it down correctly, obviously, and be able to make that work. Okay? Now, that allows for me to get a VVT and VVD. VVD from the CVT, VVT here from effectively my Mitsubishi Outlander Sports Inline 4, of which there's 4 coils there, and there's 4 coils on that Honda Accord engine. Actually, there's quite a few things there that I can just basically yank off and then stick to these things. And with that ECU, I will be able to use that as well. Okay, I measured the Mitsubishi Outlander Sports engine bay, and it will fit. I measured it using a actual tape measure that is metric, and yes, the length will fit and the height will fit, just as is. All of it would fit, but it's easier on myself by removing this is effectively like a fucking almost foot. It's not, it's like 8 inches really, honestly speaking, but that's the head. The head is like 8 inches tall. Like, that's ridiculous, and that's because it's not a crossflow. Crossflow would immediately shrink that down, and a dual overhead will widen that a little bit, and all of that does fit for what it's worth. Now granted, I'm doing some little trick work on this by removing the harmonic balancer to then make it so that way I have a compressor basically where this would be, as that would go from a conical through a gear that's a CVT setup here that goes off into that CVT breakout gearing. That's like a planetary CVT gear. I don't like using belts, so all of that would be a ring and conical hyphoid, like a differential, but you know, more of a CVT as their gearing changes there that help. Now that's all mechanical, as oil pressure would change that, as there's an oil pump in there and oil has to move. So yeah, no, actually, I don't know if you know what electroforming is, but nickel will form on aluminum and fill in those gaps. I checked. And in fact, I have boron nitride and silicon carbide that you can also get and use. Those are highly lubricative. And with the engine honing, I can nickel form on the inside and then actually like form that boron nitride on that, both on the skirts and on the inside of those cylinders. That makes it have less friction, and with the dial bore gauge, it gets back into the compression that I'm looking for, especially since the iron, you know, heads there, while everything else is forged, the iron heads can be drilled and ultimately nickel formed. They're dished, right? So like that would make it stronger because nickel is harder and stronger than iron, with a little silicon carbide and boron nitride to sort of make sure that it remains very, very strong and adheres very well and has a low friction coefficient to all of that. Now, that gives me a lot of how all of this will work very easily and very well for what it's worth. Now, that's cheaper, no offense, than some out there that don't like want to give you a dual overhead cam with a VVT, VVD, and a Desdramonic Valvetronic. So like that's what that would be. So I wouldn't be running a throttle position sensor. I'd be running a throttle using hydraulic. So like the cams run hydraulic rams. Okay. that means it pushes it down and it pulls it back up. Right? Altogether, that's cheaper to do with this setup like this. Altogether, that'll last longer too, because I don't need springs. Although springs last a very long time, but it basically means like a higher RPM, but it's really about cheap, right? And so a CVT here, which changes the gears based upon the RPM of the engine I'm looking to keep it at, means I don't have to fuck around with spring rates or any of that shit, which is a really big deal for me. Along with like a Valvetronic just means I have to alter those gearing ratios, which is way, way easier in something like that with a throttle input than something like electronics. Even though the ECU will do that, I just didn't want to do it. Right? It's altogether faster and simpler to do that. Right? And I can still hook in an electrical system for that, but I just don't need the throttle anymore. I don't need the manifold like I have. I don't need the exhaust manifold like I have, right? So like it was supposed to be just a project, but then it's like, oh, I can sell it now, right? Like I'm sure a lot of people that have L blocks out there would love a dual overhead cam setup that can actually go that hard and make that much more torque and horsepower. Especially since it has a built-in compressor that runs and helps the CVT gearing system that runs those cams, which, yeah, you can do that. Belt slip is stupid, so that's why I ran gears. Gears are better, they don't slip. Which is like, if you got to this point and you skip forward, you're probably wrong about what you're thinking this will be. Which is normal. Okay, that's par for the course. A lot of people just skip forward and just automatically think I'm wrong about something. So like there's that, right? But, regardless of all of that, as good as that will work, clearly I got stymied by some bolts that were stuck. I need an impact wrench and a propane torch, basically, to be able to heat it up and get them off. I do have a drill, but I don't have bits, and bits are expensive just as much as those things. So there's that. And yeah, these are the good tools. These are the actually kind of calibrated and will work tools. So that way I know that I am at the right torque ranges and everything else. It's altogether into CAD. It's really not as hard as some people try to make it out to be, but, it's really not that bad. Like, actually, if you edited a video ever in your life, you can fucking figure out CAD and deal with it. Okay? Same thing, all right, for like running an ECU. It's air fuel ratio. So this is open for this long, this is closed at this duration after, right? This injector, which I have injectors, obviously, right? Because I got the fucking 4 cylinders that have injectors in them. All right, I can do that. And then this came with an EFI setup that had injectors. Okay, so and you can clearly tell that there's a lot of spark plugs here. So out of all of those spark plugs, there will be 6 that will work. Okay, like there will be 6 that work. Deal with it. Right. Anyways, neither here nor there. What matters is that all of it will work. Even the transmissions will be able to be bolted. But the plan was to refurbish some of this, ultimately sell those either parts or the engines itself. And I need something to work on and cope and help me through my depression and more. So, then the parents never really helped with that. And this is all leftover money from the help that they did to help me with getting the Mitsubishi Outlander Sport and paying for the insurance and the tags and registration and everything else. So they already threatened me basically with homelessness to try and get these in. My apartment wants to remove these engines. This loaded up along with this, and then that of course has water in it. Has these tiny little feet down here, which will 100% basically act like an impact wrench and break up the floor. Nothing in this area, none of these engines are dangerous to anyone or myself, and there's no toxic hazard bullshit going on with that. I know for a fact that this doesn't weigh nearly what they think it does, but it also has wheels, so everything is on wheels. And for what it's worth, I can move that to other spots here, and they're trying to kick me out. No one else really kind of has to do anything like that. And they told me before it was okay to have them, right? But they're not wanting that. And my parents, well, that was a whole thing. Now, to get them in was a cherry picker that I got, which took 4 hours of driving and leftover money. And it's swinging an engine onto the actual pallets, right? So, getting the cherry picker in here, which, yes, I know it doesn't seem like there's enough space. There's enough space to then lift this and then bolt it down. That's what I did. But to get it out means the engine wants to tip over or fall onto the door jamb there, the doorway, right? And then there's a whole steep drop off here. That's right. Which, yeah, that's not super easy to get to. Okay. And altogether, it's harder to get them out. So the plan was to actually break them down and rebuild them out there, right? Work on them out there. That's not what happened, clearly, and I need more money, really, honestly speaking, to work on this. Parents are not going to care, and I can't really work on anything to get money. I don't have the tools, right? And a slow overtime slogfest of some chores I'd eventually be able to get done, that they would hopefully be able to pay me enough to eventually be able to afford this. But they're like, no, what, $100 for a tool? Are you insane? And I'm like, no, that's cheap actually, compared to what others spend for brand new tools. But they don't care at all. That's how that really works. And you know what? Then on the other side of it, oh, you can get them out because you got them in. And I'm totally rational in that assumption. But also, all the way the fuck back here, the earthy ground gravel nature of the... Yeah, those caster wheels are definitely, with that cherry picker, gonna fucking work out to where we're gonna break it, or even bring the block back there or anything. It's gonna work. That's what they gave me as an option, which they don't have an option for me to put them anywhere. Even though I'm not breaking a rule to have them here, and there's nothing wrong at all with them being here. They even said so until the inspection, and then they were like, I'm not okay with it now. It's not heavy enough to break anything. It's not heavy enough to damage anything. It's not a hazard, and it's not going to be any disturbing of the peace of others. Okay? Right? So they tried to cite some rule, and then they realized that their interpretation really wouldn't work, which is sort of the problem. So then they got angry and just do it anyways, and then I realized, oh, I need to get a lawyer involved. So I've been reaching out to that kind of side of things to try and get some power back in this situation, right? Because I don't want to be homeless, that kind of thing. That's what's going on with the engines. That's really what that is.